Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Amplify podcast. I'm Austin Slater, and it is so good to have Pastor Marshall Holtvluwer with me.
Yeah.
Marshall, thanks for coming today.
Glad I can be here. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, Marshall is, I'm sure you all know, new to friendship, new to the friendship community. And because we are such a big community, it's really hard to get to know people well. I know that I've been here 5.5 years now, and I'm finally starting to feel like I kind of know most of the people around. But obviously, like, it's just hard to get to know everyone, and especially because Marshall's in hot demand right now. So we figured this would be a great way for us to come have a conversation with him, for you to get to know a little bit more about him, what motivates him, a little bit of his story. So again, thanks for being here, Marshall.
Thanks for inviting me. Appreciate it.
Where did you grow up, and what's one thing about that place that still shapes you?
Yeah. So I grew up in Jenison, Michigan. I grew up in Ridgewood Christian Reformed Church, which is in Jenison. And I think reflecting on the one thing that still shapes me probably was just that church body and how community-oriented they were and how they loved each other, how they looked out for each other. And so I would say those early days of being in Sunday school and learning the Bible lessons on the felt board and is just, we did life at church. And so that shapes me today just to believe in the church body and how it's there for one another, walking with each other.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What did you think you were going to do with your life before ministry really entered the picture? Or has that kind of always been in the picture for you?
No, it was probably about a year after Calvin College that I was living in Chicago. And I thought I was going to get my MBA in business and maybe open a business or work for another business. And so I didn't know in what area of business I was going to be in, and that didn't come to fruition. I mean, God got a hold of me before that
He has a
happened.
way of doing that,
Yes,
doesn't he?
yes, absolutely. Grateful he did that before I got into something, that I had to pull out of. But
There you go. And then what would a hobby or interest be that you have that people might be surprised about?
I don't get a chance to do it a lot, but I love just hiking. So being outside in nature and just walking and talking and praying. Sometimes I used to do that in Grand Haven. There's a couple really good hiking areas, Rosie Mound and Coast Guard Park. And I'd put headphones in and just listen to podcasts, Christian podcasts, and be reminded of God's goodness. And so I think hiking would probably be what I enjoy doing, yeah. And then anything that involves my son Joseph and my kids. Not really a hobby, but I just love watching them thrive and seeing them smile and enjoy what they're doing. So
I love that.
yeah.
So then why don't you walk me through for a moment when your faith stopped being something that you just kind of inherited and when that became more real and lived and intentional for you?
Yeah, sure. Maybe a year and a half after Calvin College, I'd moved to Chicago. And I was in a small group setting with a bunch of Christians, and they were worshiping, which is not a normal thing to do in a small group setting in a Christian Reformed church. But we were worshiping, and in the back corner of the small group, one of the leaders was crying. And I thought, well, why is he crying? I mean, why would you do that as a man? Why would you cry in front of other men? And at the end of the small group session, he came over to me. His name was Ken, and he said, do you know why I was crying? And I thought, I have an idea. And he said, well, I was crying because I recognize that you don't have what I have, and you don't have the intimacy with Christ that I have. And I would like to walk with you and help you discover what that looks like to not be inherited, but have, intimate. And God kind of pierced my heart that day that I'm judgmental and that I need to be in a relationship with him. And so I had to humble myself and say to Ken, whatever it takes, man, help me have what you have. And so that began a season of him walking with me and mentoring me and showing me what a relationship with Christ can be like. So
That's so special. And again, to see the way his brokenness broke you.
Yep.
That's so profound.
Yeah, for sure. So
how did pastoral ministry specifically be the direction your life went? So I know you were saying that, God kind of got a hold of you after Calvin and saved you from business, the world of business. But like, how did the pastoral ministry come into focus?
About the same time that gentleman Ken started to mentor me, I was also volunteering with Young Life, which is a high school ministry that college students hang out with high schoolers. And so I was doing Young Life in Evanston, Illinois, and I created this program called Hash Browns. We were taking these high school kids out for breakfast, and they I started to earn their trust. And the kids would say, Marshall, you tell me that we should love Jesus, but I don't get it. Why? And I didn't have an answer for that. So I met with somebody at Calvin Seminary, and he said, it's almost like you are golfing, but you don't have the right clubs in your bag. And seminary will put more clubs in your bag and better equip you. And what he was referring to is 1 Peter 3:15, be prepared to give the reason for the hope that you have. And so that kind of set me on a path of, I want to be able to give the reason for the hope that I have. And that verse really begs the question, why do you live the way that you do? And so I had to be able to give the reason for the hope that I have. And seminary helped me to do that. So that's how I really ended up in seminary and towards the ministry, is kids were quizzing me on why I love Jesus, and I didn't know how to answer them.
Getting put on the spot really does that.
But not everybody needs to go to seminary for that. So, but that helped me in that time of my life. So
That's awesome.
yeah.
I know you've talked a little bit about Ken, and I wonder if he'd maybe fit this role, but was there someone in your life that really modeled what a good pastor looks like?
The first church I served at was Orland Park Christian Reformed Church in Orland Park, Illinois. And at that church, there was a thunderstorm that came through, and I couldn't find Pastor Jerry Erfmeyer, who was my boss. And I said to the office staff, where's Pastor Jerry? And they said, he's in the nursery vacuuming. And I said, why is the lead pastor of third largest church in the denomination vacuuming? So I went down there and said, Pastor Jerry, what are you doing? He's like, well, it needs to be vacuumed. He's like, we do what we need to do. And so that's what he was doing, was serving in a way that he thought was fitting. And I also once asked him, how do you stay at a church for a long time? How do you not leave? And he said, well, you got to love the people. You just have to be there for them and love them. And so serving and loving them were two things that he modeled for me that I'm very grateful for today.
What might some, as you learn, as you get more golf clubs, I'm sure, as I've always learned more about the faith, I've recognized that I'm like, man, I really came in here with some strong opinions about how you live faith, how you understand faith. And then the more I learn, the more I realize the less I know. Yeah. And so especially given that, you are a pastor, what was something that you once were 100% certain about when it came to a question of the faith that you're now a little bit more humble on?
Right. This may not fit the question exactly, but I'm going to share it with you.
Roll with it, yeah.
I think early on in my walk with Christ, I felt like I had the walk that I had because of something that I had done. And I was a little proud in church attendance and, studying the catechism. And I think God kind of broke me to that, to realize that it's nothing that I've done, but it's all by his grace only. And so I think I'm living more from a grateful heart and out of a state of gratitude than, pride. And so every day is a gift. And Pastor Jerry used to play Great Is Thy Faithfulness on the organ every Sunday morning to test out the organ. But it reminds me of, the scriptures tell us in Lamentations that his faithfulness is new every morning. And so, or his mercies are new. And that causes us to say, great is your faithfulness. So it's nothing I've done. But probably the question I had early on was, why me, God? Why would you choose me? And I think it's because he loves us. And, it's nothing that I've done, but because of his grace.
I love that. If you could preach on one topic and one topic only for the rest of your pastoral career, what would that be?
So a little bit of a detour, but when I was living in Chicago, I took a class at Second City, which is a comedy club. And the teacher once at the end of one of the classes said, hey, Marshall, there's something different about you. And I said, well, what is that? And she's like, are you an FBI agent or are you a priest? And I can tell me more about your question. She said, well, you just function differently. You don't swear. You don't have sexual innuendo in your comedy, And so that kind of put me on to 1 Peter 3:15. Be prepared to give the reason for the hope that you have, and do this with gentleness and respect. And so I want to live a life that shows you there's something different, like she noticed, such that you ask me, what's different about you? So instead of forcing it down your throat, I would want to continue to live a life or preach or use words when necessary. St. Francis of Assisi said, I want to live in a way that people say, what's different about you, Marshall? And then I can earn the right to be heard, young life, so that they are listening and hearing the gospel that's coming through me. So 1 Peter 3:15 would be my main text, yeah.
And through the comedy club, too. I love that.
Who would have thought? Who'd have thought? Stories there, too. That little good.
Is there a failure or a dark season that you went through that ended up being far more formative for your life than you might have thought?
Yeah, two quick things. One was I was single, living in Chicago, and I decided it would be better to work on Sundays than be in church. And so for a season, about a year maybe, I was working at a clothing store, and I just lost my rhythm. I couldn't figure out which way was up, and I think just being in the house of God's people and being with them and walking with them made life very difficult in that year. And once I got invited to a church from a young life leader, things started to come back into focus again. The second one was when my daughter Sydney was in the hospital, and that was in Orland Park, Illinois. She had pneumonia. She was young. And that night I went home from the hospital, left through the ER, which I normally do because I spend a lot of time in hospitals. I had walked out different because my daughter was a patient instead of visiting a patient. Well, that next morning, Sunday morning, my dad called me to say my mom had passed away suddenly from something that she was struggling with. And so I was dealing with, wait a minute, I'm serving you, but my daughter's in the hospital. I'm serving you, and my mom just died. But it kind of dawned on me that, I'm not exempt from any struggles. If Jesus isn't exempt, how could I be exempt? And so that's caused me to trust more in God and know that he has a bigger plan, even though it might not be, perfect and all comfort. And so, yeah, those were dark times that caused me to lean on him more and didn't push me away from him. So
that's the hope, right?
Yeah, let's be drawn closer.
Right. When you look at the church, and I don't mean friendship, but I mean the church writ large, we can either, CRC, the whole, the American church, however you want to define it. What is something that the church is doing really well, in your opinion? And what is something that it needs to do better on?
It's a very generic statement, but I think we do very well at loving those who belong to the church. And so we care for each other really well for those who are in the church. But I think sometimes when you think about believing and belonging, we expect people to believe everything before they can belong.
Yeah.
And I wonder if those could be a little closer at times where people can belong, even though they're still working out, their faith and trying to figure things out. So that doesn't mean that somebody can just belong and not believe anything, but is there a way that we can allow people to become part of that community quicker than you have to believe everything that the church believes? So.
Well, I mean, sanctification is a process, and I think we all like to think that we are all done with that process.
Yeah, never. You never graduated. So
right.
It's a good question. Yeah.
How has your understanding of God grown or changed in the last 10 years? What kind of brought that perspective shift on?
Well, I think piggybacking with the last question, I think my understanding of God has been not challenged, but it's grown a lot just in the understanding that God is always with me. And that he's not going to keep me from all harm. The Bible says that sometimes it'll keep me from all harm and danger, but that's a longer perspective of what he has in the store for us too. But I think just recognizing that God is always with us and that he'll never leave us. I often think of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego before they get thrown into the fiery furnace. And they're asked, what if God doesn't save you? And they say, well, even if he doesn't, even though he's able, we will worship him yet. And that's kind of been something I've tried to live out, is even though God might not protect me from what I'm struggling with, he's still going to be with me. So
I love
fourth man in the furnace.
Absolutely. Kind of shifting tone a little bit as we close. What is one book that's not the Bible that you think every Christian should read?
Yeah, so I'm gonna do a little illegal twist here, and I'm gonna say the Bible. I have learned through a couple different trips and traveling through the Holy Land that we have a problem with biblical illiteracy right now. And I think the Christian world knew the Bible really well, and then we started focusing on devotional books and other books. And I think we need to swing that back. So, of course, there's great books. I was going to say My Utmost for His Highest by Oswald Chambers.
Great, yeah.
But I think that the problem is that we're not reading his word anymore, and we're making declarations on what we think God believes or what we think is right for us, but we don't know where that comes from. And so we have no idea what the Bible says, a lot of people today, and that's a problem for us today. So if the world's going to challenge us, we can't use this. First and foremost, we have to use his word. So
I like that. Well, because I think you're right. I think we've outsourced our thinking a lot of the time.
Yeah, which is good, but there has to be a balance. And so we should always start with his word and then supplement what other Christians feel, because what they're writing is based on his word. So why wouldn't you start with his word?
Right. Yeah. Oh, that's great. I think that's something we all need to be reminded of.
Sure.
What is your honest relationship with Sunday mornings? Do you love them or do they kind of drag on?
I honestly love Sunday mornings. I look forward to gathering with God's people and hearing their stories. And, as I grew up at Ridgewood Church, I spent my mornings at church when mom and dad were in the choir, and I knew where all the cookies were hidden in the kitchen, and
The important stuff there.
important stuff. Yeah, but it just was home. Church is home. And so, no, I mean, there's never a moment that I come here and think, well, I didn't get anything from the Lord. I've never listened to a sermon that God hasn't blessed me by. There's always a word that God has for us. And so whether it be on Sunday morning in the message, whether it be in the offering, whether it be just seeing, and as a pastor, as I look at people in the audience, I know a lot of their stories. I know what they're struggling with. So to see them, when something bad happens, we can't withdraw from the community of faith. We have to, engage that community. And so to see people who just lost a husband or a wife walking through the door, that's just amazing that we're gathering together under those circumstances. So no, obviously you're tired sometimes when you come to work, but no, it's just gathering together with God's people is a beautiful thing. So yeah.
If you could then, for our last question here, if you could have dinner with one figure from church history, who would that be and why?
This one took me a little bit, but I think maybe the Apostle Paul. I think he reminds me of myself just a little bit, kind of being rogue and then being brought back into the faith and asking, why me, Lord? But then doing the best that you can with what God has given to you, all because of his grace and faithfulness, I think would be amazing. And I think some of the mileage he put on his feet and the missionary trips and how in the world did he get persecuted, thrown off a cliff, and then he stood back up and went right back into the town again. It's like, how did you have that chutzpah and that, that energy? And I'm sure it's because of the confidence of Christ, as Philippians tells us. But yeah, I'd want to talk to him. Of course, I would want to talk to Jesus. That's like a no-brainer. Or maybe even Joseph, his father. Tell me more what it was like to have a child.
We don't get a lot of Joseph's perspective. And that has always been someone who I'm like, I wonder what went through your head.
Yeah. Kudos to you for having faith in the plan of God, But yeah.
Yeah. Well, Pastor Marshall, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here. Hope you have a wonderful week, and all of you, go in peace.